Hello everyone, John Maher here. It is Thursday, the 16th of April 2026, and this is your weekly Grass10 update on the dairy edge. Well, what a horrible week in all things grazing. It's just the best way to describe it. You know things are bad when people on dry land are practicing a lot of on-off grazing in the middle of April. You wouldn't expect it, but that's where we are at, or have been at. I suppose the only consolation is that the weather is set to improve a lot next week. But while the weather was poor, average growth was on average better than expected, to my surprise, particularly so in the east, but certainly not in the west and the southwest, due to excess rainfall largely. Growth looks reasonable for this week, but I'd have to put a warning of where the conditions are very wet that it won't be. And I suppose that is the west and the southwest. To follow on, though, I suppose for the record, growth is predicted to be between the mid 40s and up to the mid 50s. The western parts will not do that because of excess rainfall. Dry matters are running with a lot of variation. I suppose 15% in Moore Park, 15% in Nattenroy, but a lot higher in the east, like Grange and Carlow and places. So it just depends where the rainfall is or has happened, and it was predicted to be, I suppose, above an inch for the week on average, but anyway, a lot more on the western side. It is somewhat sporadic and local in areas as well, and you can get that variation. The average farm cover, though, is running at 770 kilograms of dry per hectare as of earlier this week, which suggests that there's a reasonable amount of grass supply available on average. But there's huge variation out there, and everyone has to understand where their own figures are at. So, for example, farms with heavy land have a very high supply of grass on average. We know that, but it's hard to graze. So you can have all the grass you want, but if you don't graze it, anyway, it's not ideal at all. Some of the dry farms then are very, very low on grass supply. So we know about 25% of farms have an average farm cover of less than 600. On the opposite end of the scale, about a third of farms have an average farm cover greater than 900. So you just need to see where you're really at. Just because you have grass doesn't mean it's all grazable either. But it goes back to the farms with an average farm cover of less than 600. I suppose the real point to make there is that they're tight on grass supply, but they're growing substantially less. So they grew 35 kilograms per hectare per day, but the farms with a higher average farm cover grew 45 kilograms per hectare per day. So, that piece of having grass in the farm will generally result in higher growth rates. And I suppose those at average farm cover that's less than 600, we need to return above that mark to get growth rates back on track. When you have a low average farm cover, that means you've less leaf on the farm. You've less leaf, you grow less grass. So the figures also show that the farms with low average farm cover are eating more than they're growing. So this has to halt really. And the challenge is for this 25% of farms is to raise the average farm cover closer to 650, if at all possible, as soon as we can. So this may involve grazing additional land or injecting some extra feed into the farm. Grazing additional land, I'm targeting here maybe heifer area, maybe some low cover silage ground if that's available, maybe some zero grazing to hold things up a bit and stop the farm cover sliding. With better weather predicted now that it's the time to capitalize on that and get the farm cover back up to where it should be. It also may mean other options like increasing other feeds, like more ration, but some of those are already on a high level of that already. Some farms will feed silage, although we do know that some farms are running low on silage, and certainly some farms, while they have silage, it's not good quality and it's having an impact on performance. So different options need to be considered here. Maybe there's extra animals on the farm that should go elsewhere or leave the farm altogether. Whatever strategy is taken, though, the rotation length must be held. That is critical. There's no point in speeding up here. This only just lowers the growth rate on the farm. So I'm going to suggest 23 days. But look, that's a suggestion. Maybe some even 25 days, depending where you are. But the more we walk and the more monitoring we do, the better decisions will be made. Whatever happens as well, the fertiliser applications have to be up to date. And we know in certain circumstances they are not up to date and they're behind. And if they are behind, you just will not grow the grass as well. If I turn to the other side of the coin, on heavy farms, we know from the heavy soils program just earlier on the week that less than 50% of the first rotation has been grazed so far, but there's a huge range in that. We're from a low of about 10% to up to about a high of 90%, but that's really dependent on what rainfall was got and what soil type is there. So there's variation there too, but to be suggesting on the 16th of April that less than 50% of the farm graze is concerning. Now there is on-off grazing being practiced. Some animals are getting out by day, some are getting out in the evening time. That takes a bit of work, but being brought in before dark, like 8, half 8. But that takes, as I said, takes a bit of work. But if it's possible to graze twice a day by on-off grazing, that has to be looked at. Some of that is also driven by the fact that some of these farms have run out of silage, or certainly run out of quality silage. So the challenges are there. The only consolation is we know things are looking up weather-wise. I would suggest that on the farms with low percentages grazed on heavy land, that some of it will not get grazed at all and would need to be turned into silage, and that decision made probably sometime next week. We have to graze a certain amount of land, but I'd be targeting the wettest fields with the poorest quality grass, maybe the poorest grazing infrastructure to be diverted to silage. And probably my preference is short-term silage. What I mean by that is that not cutting it at the end of May, but maybe cutting it in early May, getting grass back into the system for further down the road. So anyway, that's the difficult grazing story that has happened for the last week. On to fertiliser sow applications. And looking at the figures that we do have, there's huge variation in fertiliser and slurry application across the country, depending on ground conditions and grass covers, and whether farmers are up to speed or not. So I suppose just to acknowledge that there is people behind, but just to give the targets when I am here, like the dry farms should have at least 60 units per acre of nitrogen applied at this stage between fertiliser and slurry. And the next target would be about 80 units by early May. Our preference, I suppose, is for a nitrogen, P and K and sulfur type product where there's a P allowance available and where slurry wasn't applied to go out in the month of April. If paddocks have received slurry, then we're into a kind of nitrogen plus sulfur type product. But not to forget the sulfur, I suppose, really is the key point there. Okay, so on heavy land, that's a much trickier story. Some people have got a level of fertiliser out on a part of the farm. There's some parts of the farm have got nothing. I suppose we'll look to try and catch up on that if at all possible. If it's going for short-term silage, be very careful of what you're going to apply, if you apply at all. People like myself, and I suppose I'll refer to David Wall here from Johnston Castle. We like the P to try and get out in April, late April, early May on heavy farms, if at all possible. Heavier farms have a bigger demand for P than drier farms. We know that. So look, it's going to be a case of catch up for those farming heavier land. But we like, if there's P allowance there, of course, to some P to go out fairly very soon to try and keep grass growth going, to try and help repair the damage that has been done, and to get the tillering and all those pieces of what we need the grass plant to do up and running, because it has been a difficult spring. If we move on to reseeding, a difficult subject to be talking about, I suppose, given the way the weather has come and things are running late, but still needs to be targeted. All our national stats tell us is way behind in reseeding over the last few years. There was some catch up in 25, admit that, but 23, 24 we're behind. We're a bit behind already. There's not as much land spread off as we'd like to see for reseeding. But we just know the way things are going, that we get better responses to nutrient from reseeded swards. Spring is the opportune time to do this, because weed control is easier. Establishment, I would argue, is easier. I admit the ground conditions and grazing so far have made timelines difficult, but anyway, we can still look at this. We're looking to aiming to reseed about 10% of the farm on a yearly basis, if at all possible. That includes the silage ground as well, of course, and out farms. But we do know that when we get the reseed up, if it will surpass, the poorest performing paddocks on the farm in terms of grass production for the year, given its ability. Finally, to our feature farmer on this section, that's Declan Flynn, who's farming on a dry farm outside Kilmallock, County Limerick. Declan was awarded the County Limerick Pasture Progress Award recently, which I'll come back to in a few minutes. So well done to him, and we decided to feature him in the newsletter this week. His average farm cover is running in the high 700s, grew 30 kilograms of dry matter per hectare per day, which I suppose was slightly disappointing for Declan, but that's what it was. And the average cover per livestock unit is about 250. So similar enough to the average pasture-based figures. has started the second round on the 12th of April, is overlapping the first round, ended the first round grazing with the start of the second round. The cover back on the first graze paddock for the start of the second round was about 1600. Anyway, overlapping first round and second round, yeah, which is not maybe the worst idea the way things are going. In terms of fertiliser, then I suppose the farm has received over 50 units of nitrogen per acre on average to date, and Declan is now spreading a product with 25, 3, 12 plus 6% sulphur on the ground that didn't get slurry. About 30% of the slurry went to this grazing ground, but the rest of the ground will get some of that product. Lucky enough to have a pea allowance to do that. I suppose in terms of just the cows, then the breeding season is going to start on the 23rd. The replacement heifers have been out over a month already, which is good to see. In terms of performance, then the cows are on a grass full time and about 3.5 kilograms of meal. They're currently doing about 453 fat and about 3.6 protein, doing just over 2.3 kilograms of mixed solids per today. So Declan's going okay now, to be fair, compared to some of the figures we see for farms. So not bad. Just mentioning the pasture progress awards, as Declan was a county winner. They were held recently with a winner from each county. It's a new approach to the Grass10 Farmer of the Year competition. So 26 county winners and 3 regional winners picked from Munster, Leinster and Connacht Ulster. The 3 regional winners will go forward to the national awards to be held in May. I suppose we'd like to extend a huge congratulations to each individual county winner, their families, and all their support staff and the advisors who have helped them get to win a county award, and just to acknowledge that achievement. The list of the winners are on the website and in the Grass10 newsletter. For the record, a special congratulations to our regional winners, because they competed against other farms in the region. So to Liam Rochford from County Wexford, to David, Ian and Glenn Williamson from County Cavan, very much a team effort there. Speaking of team efforts, to Esther Walsh and Keane and Oisin Shannon from Waterford, who were the Munster winners, which also is very much a team effort. So congratulations to all of them. Let's hope we all can keep winning into next week, and that the weather improves. So best of luck. It's been a difficult week, but heads up, the weather is going to improve and we'll try and make the best of it. See you all next week.